Hello again. We are Southeastern 14. I'm Chris Lee, the host, joined by Blake Lovell and a very special, I say guest, but he's going to be more than a guest. His name is Gavin Schoenwald. I will let him tell you about himself in just a minute. But anyway, welcome to this. We, being Blake and I, have batted around for a while the idea of doing a daily show. Football season is almost here, and so are we, Blake, and very excited to get this off the ground.
Yeah, like you said, we've talked about this a while. I think we teased this. We may even told you guys we were going to do this at some point a while back, and whoops, we didn't actually get to it because we were doing a million other things. But yeah, this is something we wanted to kind of experiment with. And look, if it sticks, it's great. If you guys are like we hate this, then hey, we will listen to you guys as we always have. So yeah, this will be a lot of fun, and I know having Gavin's perspective will be much better for those of you out there who understand that Chris and I have not been on an SEC football field in a uniform recently or ever. I think I may have been at one point as a child, Chris, but I don't think I was an active competitor on the field. But that's where Gavin, will step in and really, I think, give a perspective that will just be great, I think, for SEC football fans. So.
Agreed. And we're going to get right into topics in just a minute, and I think topics that people want to hear on. But Gavin, give the audience a brief introduction of yourself, your
Yeah,
experiences, those sorts of things.
yeah, for sure. So first off, appreciate Chris, Blake. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm really excited about this, guys. I think that just to all you viewers out there, this is a conversation that Chris and I have kind of been going on back a couple months. Honestly, we talked a lot about me coming on here and giving my perspective about what it's like being inside the locker room on the field. When you pull up to an SEC stadium as the guest and you're coming off the bus, what's that experience like? And so I'm just here to kind of give an insider perspective and provide some stories. Chris and I were talking yesterday, and we kind of just got lost in conversations. We were telling stories back and forth, and that's exactly what I want to provide to this show. And so played tight end at Vanderbilt for 5 years, but want to make this clear: this is not a Vanderbilt show. This is the Southeastern 14. We're talking about SEC football, and it's just like us three are just like everyone that watches the show. We eat, drink, and live SEC football, and so I'm really excited to talk about this. And appreciate you, Chris and Blake, for having me on.
Chris, I think you're frozen. I mean, look, it wouldn't be a news show at
Yeah,
Southeastern
looking forward
14
to it. Gavin,
without
again, in addition to being a 5-year player, was starting this time a year ago at Vanderbilt as a tight end, and also in addition to that was a captain. So got a leadership view of things too.
Yeah, no doubt. And
Okay, got a little bit of a delay on my end. Yeah, apologies.
That's okay. I mean, look, if you're watching this, let's just be honest. If you've watched anything we've done before, it's almost comical. There's always going to be a technical issue. So you guys know that this is how it works at Southeastern 14, presented to you by technical issues. So it's fine. It'll correct itself. But yes, we're excited to get this started. So.
Well, the crazy thing is I finally got the high-speed internet that they have been digging up my yard for 2 years. If it's on my end, I'm just going to pull my hair out and give up at this point.
They
But
better
anyway,
keep digging.
guys, let's talk SEC football. And I think quarterback situations are on the mind of a lot of folks right now. You've got some that are settled and some that aren't. I'm thinking we might even have a day this week just for quarterbacks and quarterback competitions and things like that. But Gavin, I want to start with you. You've got some schools that have got quarterback situations that are maybe more settled than others. You've got some places like Alabama where I don't think Alabama's really got a 4-man competition at quarterback, but when you've got 3 guys going for the job and then a freshman who some say outperformed all of them at some point, that kind of talk starts. You were in a quarterback room that changed hands several times during the latter part of your career. What are those like? What are the things that people don't think about in terms of how they affect the team and leadership and things like that? As you were looking at situations like Alabama, maybe Missouri, where there's a little bit of uncertainty, how does that affect the locker room and the players?
I think from an outsider's perspective, it's easy to say, oh, you got to have a quarterback because he's the leader in the locker room and this and that. And that's true. But from an insider's perspective, I would actually double down on that because have heard so many times, I've heard this before. It says, if you have quarterbacks, because there was one guy in that locker room, the one guy that everyone's looking to get that thing going. And so, yeah, I think this is. I know you and I were talking yesterday, Chris, but I think this is one of the more unique situations that we've seen in a while in terms of the power at the top of the SEC in the quarterback situation. LSU set with Jaden Daniels. There's plenty of schools like that who have, get returning guys who have proven themselves and can lead their team, like Jaden did at the SEC championship with the Tigers. But I think what's going on at Alabama is really interesting, and I don't know if we've seen something like this recently in the Nick Saban era, to be honest with you. And them and going getting Buckner after spring ball, to me, is kind of a panic move. And so I'm not saying that whoever is taking snaps under center is not going to be great for Alabama, but that was definitely they showed their hand a bit to say we don't love Milroe or Simpson, and we're going to take another look at another guy. And so I think that's really interesting there. I saw what Georgia just did, naming Carson Beck the starter, and talk about some shoes to fill, man. Like that is you're going in for a campus legend, legit, and you're going in for a guy who's back-to-back MVP of whatever of that national championship, and those are some huge shoes to fill. But I mean, he's got the roster, he's got the best O-line in the country, he's got 5-star receivers, he's got everything he needs to be successful there. But yeah, I think that it's going to be really, really interesting to see this year, specifically Alabama, because that's by far the most intriguing one to me. Because usually there it was just next man up. It was Tua, Mac Jones, next man up. Mac, Bryce Young, next man up. Here, it's a little bit of a question mark, and I don't know if we've ever seen that in I would say the modern Nick Saban era. And so, if I had to predict, I would predict that Milroe would run out there first for the first snap of the year. Does he last the whole season? That's the question, because there's some pretty high standards down there in Tuscaloosa.
Well, I have two follow-up questions. I'll let Blake get in his first, though.
Well, I was going to say, and I think what's interesting about that, and we've all talked about Alabama here on the channel this summer, is I think, Chris, you wound up picking Alabama to make the college football playoff, but I think we all found a way to pick LSU to win the division. And I think the reason is because, like we've talked about, I think just the quarterback position being an unknown at Alabama, I think magnifies everything else. Meaning, I think a lot of people are, well, this could be Saban's, worst year or something. And it's not because they are not ridiculously talented, because they are at so many different positions. And if you look elsewhere, it's like, well, look at all these wide receiver, look at, the defense with Dallas Turner and all these other guys, Kool-Aid McKinstry. And it's just like, how can you not be impressed, right? But I think it's because it is the quarterback position that all of a sudden that is so important, right? And it's just, okay, well, could Alabama, and like you said, Gavin, it's like Jaden Daniels is at LSU, KJ Jefferson's at Arkansas. You keep going down the line and you've just got all these guys that are known, and that's a reason to really buy into those teams. But when you look at Alabama, it's just so different now being in the situation where it's like, all right, maybe things magnify a little bit because you just don't know at that top position what you're going to get from any of those guys. So,
yeah. And I would say too, if I can jump in on that, these aren't just, unproven guys who are stepping in to fill, the previous starter's role. We're talking about at Alabama, we're talking about the first overall pick in the NFL draft that they're trying to fill shoes of. And even at Georgia, we're talking about the back-to-back MVP of the national championship game. I mean, I don't even know. They could have a perfect season next year and they still might not even fill the shoes. And so,
Yeah,
ginormous. I'm talking about both schools, ginormous expectations. But that locker room, I'm not surprised that Kirby will go ahead and jump the gun and name the starter, because guys look to, especially you saw Stetson Bennett's influence at Georgia. Guys are looking to someone, and that position is so pivotal. It can either take a team to the top, or it can take a tremendous roster, like both those teams have, like you were saying, Blake. And if they're not getting tremendous play and elite play at the quarterback position like they've gotten the past years, they may not be having the big years that they've had.
Gavin, there's two things about how the quarterback choice affects a team. One is the leadership and chemistry. I'm going to get to that one next. But first, I want to ask you, you played in a situation a year ago where you come off a season where Ken Seals had been the starter. He's got a very distinct personality and style of play and gifts. They start Mike Wright, does Vanderbilt a year ago, who's kind of a runner, 10.800 meter guy, really athletic, the arm was, a little bit hit and miss. And then you guys end up playing with AJ Swan, who was a true freshman with the cannon for an arm. 3 very different guys. And coaches will say, well, it doesn't really matter. The offense is the offense. And we just put in the guy to run it. I never really believed that. that seems too easy because guys have, different skill sets. That's not how it goes on in the locker room, is it?
No, that's not how it goes in the locker room. As a matter of fact, I would say, I think that when you hear people have, like I said earlier, that's coach talk, and they're trying to protect their team, and I understand that. For us and my personal experience, I don't want to talk about too much, but for my personal experience, you're trying to do your best at your position. You're trying to win your one-on-ones and everything that you talk about, in your individual person meetings. You're not in the meetings with the quarterbacks. You're in there with your fellow tight ends, your fellow receivers, whatever position you play. And so when you prepare all week and spend, 35, 40 hours a week preparing, and then by quarter 2, there's someone else in there, and then by quarter 4, there's someone else in there, I'd be lying to you if it said it didn't create a little bit of chaos. It does. And so, and I think those moves are made for, the best decision of the team. Like for us, when that change happened in the middle of the season with Mike and AJ, it was in the middle of that Wake Forest game. We were in a dogfight and it was pouring rain. And, we kind of had to play a little catch up. We know we had to air it out a little bit. And that's when AJ came in and got his chance. And so, I think it definitely creates a little bit of chaos in the locker room. That's why I commended Kirby for naming it early, because, he's calling a shot and saying, this is our guy and this is our guy now, versus you're having situations at Alabama and even outside the SEC in Ohio State where you get 2 or 3 games in and it's still a competition. It's still, you're still going. And, now it's the inter squad scrimmages are over. The fall camp practices are over. It's about who performs in the game. And if you're not naming a starter, I would really say by now, then you're going into it saying, it's may the best man win reps wise in the game, no matter who takes the first one on the first Saturday.
Well, the other thing, go ahead, Blake.
No, I was going to say real quickly, just a quick shout out to everybody in the chat so far. Good audience here. David, appreciate you joining us. Austin, Nathan, Chris, I see all you guys and your comments in there. Nathan, we're going to get back to your comment on Alabama here in just a second, but just want to say appreciate you guys. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And we appreciate it.
Here's the other thing I wanted to ask you, okay? I think to me on the outside, the thing that you're hoping for as a coach for multiple reasons. One is it's easier. Obviously, you want a quarterback to come to the forefront and say, this is the best guy that you have confidence in. But to me, the nightmare always was if you have 2 guys that are close.
Yeah.
Because, and especially in this case, okay, if it's between a guy that's been on the roster for a while and a guy who's coming in, because quarterbacks often are leaders of teams. You guys are close. You spend time together. You get to bond. And so if you're in a situation where, say, the starting quarterback is your friend, and a transfer comes in and it looks like it's even, the coach picks the other guy, to me, that always looks like a recipe for a chemistry disaster. Mm-hmm. Walk us through how locker rooms process those things and maybe even the things that we don't think about as outsiders.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, at the beginning of fall camp, I think that you are so laser focused on winning as a player. I'm speaking here. You're so laser focused on winning your position battle and thinking about what am I doing? But I'd be lying to you if I said that your, aunt and uncle and brother and sister and was calling you asking, hey, who's the quarterback going to be this year? Hey, who's the quarterback going to be this year? We hear that all the time. And I'd also be lying to you if, we didn't have, player to player conversations like that in the locker room of like, hey man, this guy looked great today and this guy struggled, or hey, this guy looked great today and this guy struggled. And so I think when you're going through a fall camp, and that's really where it's won. And the spring ball, I kind of hate spring ball because people can flash and people are like, oh, he looks great. Okay, well, you didn't see the other 14 practices where he threw 12 interceptions and so, fall camp is really where it's won and lost in the quarterback battle. It's hot, the ball's wet because everyone's sweating. You got to get there. Your 24 period practices where you're out there for 3 hours. That's when the top rise and the guys fall to the bottom. And so it creates a little bit of awkwardness when towards the end there kind of starts to be a guy emerging, and that's what we always like to see is a guy emerge. And like you said, Chris, where it gets awkward and confusing and a little chaotic is when it really is neck and neck. And either guy, could go out there and win games for you, but only one guy can play. And the truth is, I'm seeing I see a comment as well from one of our viewers, Nathan, about Alabama can they play two quarterbacks? I've never in my life, to be honest with you, and I played at a really high level. I I've seen it in the Eastern Conference, and then in my short stint in the NFL, you've seen it with the 49ers right now. I've never seen a two quarterback system work ever. And the reason it doesn't work is because it's one voice, one huddle. Otherwise, it's always a competition throughout the entire year. And so to answer your question, Nathan, I don't think that that's a route. I would be shocked if that's a route that Saban goes. I think that all his guys, I think that he's a plethora of riches. I think all those guys can play. But at the end of the day, there's got to be one guy. Is it the same guy that starts the season? Maybe not. But you got to go with one guy to start, and then eventually, usually, one guy rises to the top, and that's usually more apparent in games than it is in fall camp practices.
All right, Gavin, I want to ask you more about Jalen Milroe because you were on the field, not playing against him last year, but on the other sideline. But you know what? We could make this a quarterback show today. We've got some other topics to get to. I'm just going to tease that one as maybe a tomorrow or Friday episode.
Okay.
So I want to go here before we move on from quarterbacks. And I know we've got at least one Mississippi State fan here listening right now. Mike Wright, you played with him at Vanderbilt a year ago. Yeah. Again, we've talked about his skill set. To me, if you had said Mike Wright's going to transfer, that wouldn't have shocked me because A.J. Swan ended up winning that job. When I saw him land at Mississippi State, that was a what in the world? Because that does not fit what they've traditionally done. Now, I've heard them talking about packages for him. I'm just very interested if you were surprised as I was with that was the destination. And what do you think the future for him looks like there with Will Rogers, a guy that's taken just about every snap the last 3 years?
Yeah. Well, before I dive into this, let me just say Mike Wright is one of the best leaders I've ever been around. And he is an unbelievable voice, was for our program and will be as well. I've seen just in the offseason that has at Mississippi State. And so, when he decided to leave Vandy, I was sad because it was, a good friend of mine. And I knew it was the core leadership of our team. But I also knew that he could probably thrive maybe better somewhere else as, the power was kind of transferring to AJ. And so I remember in late December and January, Mike's still on Vanderbilt's campus, and I'm seeing him, in the athletic parking lot. I'm seeing him places and just having small conversations about where you're going. And he told me a few schools, and then out of the blue, out of nowhere, kind of like you and the whole rest of the world, I see he commits to Mississippi State. And of course, the first thing I think is Mississippi State. They got a kid that absolutely rips it and has no chance of getting his spot taken. And so that was definitely a little puzzling. At the same time, I know Mike, I know his family, they're really smart and sharp people. And so that decision was obviously made for a reason. And Mike is, as we've seen, in the Kentucky game last year and in many games previously, when that dude's rolling, ain't nobody catching him. And so I would be surprised. I'd be really surprised if they don't use him, whether it's some type of wildcat package, a goal line package, or maybe even, I don't even know if they have him at receiver. I don't know. I'm just totally spitballing here. But I would be shocked if Zach Arnett leaves a talent like that on the sidelines without playing, 20, 25, 30 snaps a game. He's too talented not to be out there for that. Rogers is the starting quarterback at Mississippi State, and there's no pressure on him at all. He's the starting quarterback. He's the guy. But Mike Wright is too dangerous not to be on that field and can blow games wide open, can change it on one play.
Yeah, I heard some talk. I think this was on Mike Bratton's show the other day that they've got some packages for him. I think he and Rogers have been on the field at the same time. And I think your hunch seems to be correct coming out of what's come out of camp. But Gavin, I want to go to the east of us. We're doing this in Nashville. Tennessee Vols won 11 games a year ago, finished strong with that beating of Clemson in the Orange Bowl. Joe Milton started the last two games. Again, you were on the field, not at the same time, but on the other sideline. Mm-hmm. Kid's got a rocket arm. He's also got a star recruit behind him, but all indications are that that's his job to lose at this point. I think the chemistry in that room seems to be pretty good from what I hear. What is your take on Joe Milton? Because, he can throw the ball through a concrete wall.
Yeah.
He doesn't always know where it's going. That's the knock on him, as everybody knows. But he also didn't throw a pick a year ago. How do we think that works out in Knoxville this year?
Yeah, well, I think this is going to be a little long-winded, so stay with me. But it all makes sense in the end. I think Joe Milton is obviously unbelievably talented. I mean, he does things as a quarterback in terms of how he throws the ball, how he makes it look so easy. My level, especially at the collegiate level. And so he deserves all his flowers there because he's got the talent through the roof. Now let's start back at the beginning with Josh Heupel. Let's not forget that Joe Milton was the starter for Heupel's first game at Tennessee. He was the guy. He beat out Hendon Hooker in their first fall camp, and then eventually got pulled, and Hooker took over. And Hendon Hooker was just this totally different guy than he was at Virginia Tech. And what made Hooker so good is he showed up every game and was the same guy every single game for the University of Tennessee. And when Milton has come in, sometimes he's shined, he's been great. And so I think the big question with Joe Milton is not, is he talented enough? I think he's talented enough to be up in the top quarterbacks of the SEC. And if you're in the top quarterback of the SEC, you got a chance of being in New York at the end of the year. I think that's a possibility for Milton. But we got to see it the whole year because he hasn't put a sample size nearly enough to put, to be having all the Kool-Aid that everybody wants to give Tennessee right now. And so I would say that I am confident that he's going to have a big year. I think Heupel's a little bit of a quarterback whisperer. I know that's maybe a little overused a bit, but I mean, it'd be hard to deny that with what we saw with the absolute transformation we saw with Hendon Hooker. And so, Milton's had his times and he shined at sometimes, but we need to see it for 12 games in the gauntlet that we all know the Southeastern Conference is, whether it's on the road at Alabama, they got a big game. They got a big game on the road at Kentucky. Then they host Georgia at home at the end of the year. South Carolina at home at the end of the year, which we all know after last year is not a gimme game. And so, these are all games that we need to see him be the same Joe Milton he is when there's no pressure and he can play free because Hendon Hooker's in front of him. We need to see that for a whole 12 games. I think we can. I really do think we can. But we need to see it through all 12 games before we truly give him, maybe all the flowers that he's gotten this whole offseason.
Yeah, Tennessee's an interesting team, guys. I mean, we talked about it, Chris, this summer. They're a team that, like we said, with that system and Milton stepping in, we talk about the two running backs coming back, and they've got just a great running back, room. You expect some of those receivers to step up, have big seasons, kind of breakout years. I don't know if it's going to be exactly like a Jalen Hyatt-esque season that we saw, but, Brew McCoy's there, Squirrel White, Ramel Keaton. You look at that defense, Chris, I know you brought them up in the past, just about probably were not as bad as sometimes people made them out to be last year, just a product of how much they're on the field, just with how fast the offense was moving the ball last year. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why it always, comes back to Joe Milton now, because he is, I don't want to say he's the biggest unknown, but like Gavin said, I mean, it's just seeing it a bigger sample size, right? Outside of just, a couple spots here or there. And yeah, I mean, stepping in for a guy like Hendon Hooker just became a Heisman candidate. And I think, as Gavin mentioned too, and Chris, I don't know if this was one of your bold predictions, but somebody talked about Joe Milton being in the Heisman conversation at the end of the season. We were doing that. We talked about it at some point this summer. So yeah, I mean, Tennessee is, again, I don't think the expectation, and certainly not for Tennessee fans at this point, is for them to go backwards. Once you set that standard of where they are now, I mean, they want it to be back to where they were in the 90s, where it's every single year you're expected to win double-digit games. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the pressure that's on Joe Milton to, be able to lead them to that. And yeah, and let's just go ahead and pull up the comment, Chris. You saw it. Blaine, we know, made one of our predictions. Blaine Gilmer, he said it's going to be Nico time by season's end. That was Blaine's bold prediction in our video, that Joe Milton would not, start every game this season. So kind of plays into the discussion here. So we'll see.
Yeah, I will politely disagree with our friend Blaine, because I think that you said it. You called Josh Heupel a quarterback whisperer. Again, I pointed this out many times. It's not as if when Hendon Hooker transferred in to Tennessee, people were saying, oh, here's the next Heisman contender, the next All-SEC guy. He's done this once with a guy that was a guy somewhere else, but not the stud that he wound up being. But I want to ask you this, and maybe this is a little bit unfair, because you were an offensive player and you were on the sidelines. But I'm just curious, What was the buzz? How much did that offense change with Joe Milton last year after Hendon Hooker got hurt?
Yeah, I think that with Milton, the biggest thing that is going to be tough to defend is the deep ball because it's unlimited. I mean, you could be on the 10-yard line and he's going to put it on the opposite 20. And if he's got a guy out there that can run a 4.4, he's got a chance to go get it. And so, I think that makes it so tough is especially when last year specifically when you had Jalen Hyatt who could absolutely fly. You got to back and play a little more deep in your coverage. And so, I think, and I love nothing. We all do. We all sit in the stands and someone throws a deep ball and it's like, and we all love watching that. But if Joe Milton can take what the defense gives him, which is going to be 10-yard curls, which is going to be slants, which is going to be 10-yard digs, and not have his eyes light up like fireworks and want to throw a post or a go every other route, I think that they're going to methodically be able to march down the field and score on anybody. I mean, we saw it last year. Last year was magical for Tennessee. Let's call it what it is. Last year was a magical season for them. Cherry on top was beating Alabama, and they just let it get away from them that night in Columbia. But moving forward, but what made them so good was Hooker did everything Heupel told him to do. Hit all his 10-yard routes and then took the deep ones. And, obviously he had his playmakers out there to do it. And so, I think that people are going to want Milton to throw the ball. I'm not kidding. Tennessee fans are going to want Milton to throw the ball 80 yards 4 times a game. And if he doesn't, the fans might boo him. But the thing is, if he can, bang in those slants and the curls, that's just going to open up so much more because that's what the defense is going to give up. They're going to say, we're going to live with that. We're going to live with the 10-yard catches. We're going to live with the slants. What we can't get beat on is the 60-yard posts, and that's what Milton's going to want to throw.
Yeah, well, and plus, not to mention NFL scouts are going to be watching to see how he makes those throws. So his coaching staff would not be doing him a favor if they weren't giving him chances to build those in, which I'm sure they will. I want to ask you something before we move on because we got Brian Kelly to talk about, and I think we've got what else? Jimbo Fisher, Bobby Petrino are on the list today. The clock rules this year. It's going to be a slower game in terms of plays. Does that affect Tennessee in your mind at all?
Well, let me I don't want to totally correct you, but it's going to be a faster game with fewer plays. And so
yes, that's what I meant.
And so the game overall is going to go by quicker just with the first down stop or not stopping after a first down and such. I don't know if how that's going to affect Tennessee directly. I think they're just going to roll. I really do because they weren't waiting for that clock to start after the chains were moving anyway. And so I think they're just going to roll. I think it's going to really affect teams who are kind of still in I think I'm not affect either in a good way or a bad way, but I think it's just going to be different for teams that still huddle because you move past the chains and you come and huddle and you go back to the line. And now instead of 10 seconds that clock off, you're looking at 30, 35 seconds because it was running the whole time before the ball was spotted and the chains were moving. And so that's a huge, you're going to look at if you ran 80 plays on offense, which I would say is still a pretty good handful of plays, for a team that huddles, that may get cut down to 60. It may get cut down by 20 plays. It may get cut down by 15 plays. And so that's going to, especially if you're playing against Kentucky, who's going to run the ball 100 times with Ray this year. And so, I'm just really interested to see what that's like for teams that still huddle because you're going to look up after the first 2 games and say, man, we only got 61 plays. We only got 58 plays and see if by week 3, week 4, week 5, you see a little more tempo with those teams that like to huddle.
Chris, real quickly, shout out to David joining us. Listen, good. I'm just glad David's out of the work meeting. He's here. Jaron's here supporting the Hogs, and Chris all in on Texas A&M beating the hell out of New Mexico. So we appreciate you guys joining the chat as everyone has. Again, if you want to leave your questions, comments, you can do that. We may get to your questions a little bit later on as we go through this. But, yeah, be sure to leave us some comments, guys. We appreciate your support of the channel. So,
Blake, I'll let you direct where we go next because I know we've got LSU and A&M to talk about. We may have some comments that are worth discussion. I'll let you direct our next step here.
Let's just go to Bobby P and Jimbo first because we're on an offensive kick here. Let's go to Petrino and Jimbo because that's the whole talk this offseason. Everybody knows, I think, where we all stand, Chris, on this. You and I were talking about it after SEC Media Day, Jimbo's comments there and sort of deflecting. Just give a full answer on kind of the dynamic there between the two. And then as part of our Texas A&M bowl predictions, which, guys, if you haven't seen them, we did bowl predictions for every team. You can find a video on the channel of your favorite team. My bowl prediction is that this would not be a repeat of WrestleMania 3 with Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant. We would not see Jimbo and Petrino body slam each other on the sidelines like everybody thinks they're going to. So you got a lot of differing opinions on what's going to happen here. And so let's let Gavin have the floor here to give his opinion on this, because everybody has an opinion on whether this Jimbo Fisher, Bobby Petrino dynamic is going to work. So let's see what Gavin has to say.
Well, let me try to give it from I'm going to place myself back in the locker room as a guy who has them on my schedule this year. As a defensive player, I would say. First thing off, let's just say it's just a little weird. It's weird, especially his comments at media day where he wouldn't really answer who's calling the plays and whatnot. And I can't even tell you, do they get along? Was that like a forced hire from somebody higher up? I'm not really sure. And so it was just a little odd to me. And so as a player, I'm looking at that. If I'm on the A&M team, I probably understand, through fall camp, through practices and whatnot, I'm probably have a better understanding of someone on the outside, or even someone who, loyally follows A&M media or Texags or whatever it may be. As a player, I think that you don't really know what to expect until, I would say, after 2 SEC games. Because if I had to predict what's going to happen, I think that Jimbo's not going to give up the play calling duties. I don't think so. I think that Petrino will be kind of tugging on his arm and saying this. And if they get a tough loss, early in the year, let's just watch out, because it could unfold a little early for the Aggies, if we're being honest. At the same time, let's not take away that Bobby Petrino is a damn good offensive coach. And so, I think if I was Jimbo, I would be, more than welcoming him with open arms of his opinions and his ideas. I think, and overall, I think A&M is just a total wild card team. They are coming off a year where it was just kind of a whole big what the heck just happened. And I was for sure at the end of last year that Jimbo was not going to be back, to be honest with you. And I was just waiting for those two those headlines to come out on my Twitter and whatnot to see that he got fired. But I guess that buyout's a little big. And so we'll see. A&M's a funky place, because when they joined the SEC, obviously, if you guys saw the Manziel documentary recently, they had immediate success, both with star players and winning the first year in Alabama. Who does that? No one does that. And so, kind of like what just happened last year at Tennessee, that standard got set early for what it's like for A&M to play in the SEC. And they've built it up. They built all these facilities, and it's an unbelievable nice place. And I know that, I guess this is a little long-winded, but this is a funny story from a player's perspective here is, you go to these other stadiums, you go to Kentucky, you go to Tennessee, you go to Florida, and every school tries to make their visitors' players' locker room about as miserable as possible. Standard lockers and whatnot in space, but about as miserable as possible. Just crappy stuff everywhere, hard to get around. Inconvenient is probably the best word. When we went and played at A&M in 2020, I might as well have just walked into like a Quantum Fitness locker room, man. This thing was sleek. It was clean. Every locker was like huge. We went to the bathroom and they had like all these things lined up. You had shampoo. They had like mouthwash for you. I mean, I was like, this is the Four Seasons, man. Like, and so, I've heard some chirping as well from people over there and other players I know that have played there as well. They're like, man, we should play at A&M every week, because we get treated like all that, and that does not happen in the rest of the SEC. So maybe it's a little too nice out there. They built all that up when they joined the SEC. So I'm interested to see what happens. I think Petrino, what happens at the beginning of the season, but by the end of the year, I'd be surprised if that's not either, a co-thing, or if Petrino's really the one ripping it off, if he truly is, because it may be Jimbo behind the scenes.
Okay, I got to take a sidebar here, because I was having a discussion with some people about locker rooms, and it's like, treat everybody like crap, make it the worst thing imaginable, make it miserable.
Yeah.
Like, hang on, guys. We're in the transfer portal era. Does it not maybe should you not make it the Taj Mahal, because you never know when the guy on the other sideline is going to be in your locker room the next year? I mean, what do you think about that, Gavin?
I think that obviously we're in a different era of college football when it comes to the transfer portal. And if some teams want to look at it as, when other teams come in to play for them, if they want to treat it as a recruiting weekend for some of their other star players, then that's up to them. And maybe that's what A&M's doing. I have no clue. But yeah, I just remember walking in there and, you go to like the swamp at Florida and you got to walk, I'm not kidding, like half a mile to get to the field and all the way up and around and down the stadium. And we pulled our buses into the stadium. We got out. We had this whole entire. I mean, it was Kyle Field was first class, but is it too first class? Is it too first class for the visitors? Because you kind of want to make them. You kind of want to make that miserable for visiting teams.
All right,
I want to ask you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Blake.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know how close you are to players at A&M. I know that you got group chats all over the place, and there's a lot of interconnectivity in college football that wasn't there years ago. What was the buzz coming out of A&M a year ago in terms of where it went wrong, if you were privy to those conversations?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Chris. I would say that players from schools alike across, especially interconference, are all a lot closer with each other now than they were when I started my career at Vandy in 2018. Because when I started in 2018, you didn't transfer, because if you transferred, you were sitting out, and that time is really valuable. You do not want to be sitting out, because what happens if you go, you transfer, you sit out, you get hurt the next year, you're going into your fourth year of college and you haven't played at all. You didn't even play. And so you kind of, when you committed to a school and signed there, you were there for good, and it was kind of an us versus them attitude. And it still kind of is, but people from other schools are constantly talking, not necessarily, hey, come join me, or hey, are you going to transfer? But we just talk more. We just talk more and compare experiences and whatnot. And, I think at A&M last year, it was just a little funky because they had that recruiting class that was the best the world's ever seen, and they went 3-9. And so it was just a little confusing there of what transpired. And so I think that's why there was such an overhaul of staff there at A&M, is because I think they kind of said, okay, you better change something, because if you're going to have the same players back and whatnot. But they also led in transfer portal entries, I believe, too. And so you look at all that stuff, and there's all types of culture questions and what that looks like. If I had to predict, I think that I think Connor Wegman's a good quarterback for A&M. I think they're really going to miss Devin Achane. I thought he was a monster. I thought Devin Achane was a monster. And so I think they're really going to miss him next year. But I'm sure they got someone that we have never heard of who is 6'4", 240 and can run you over and run a 4.3. So we'll find out what A&M rolls out there next year, the running back position.
Chris, that was one of your bold predictions, wasn't it? Chris may be frozen again. He probably is. But no, I think that was one of Chris's bold predictions about the Texas A&M running game. So, all right, Gavin, while Chris gets unfrozen, I was going to ask you about LSU, and that was, I know you mentioned Jaden Daniels earlier, and I think, we've talked a lot this summer about just how it's like we need to really go back and think about where LSU was predicted by a lot of people last season. Like they were predicted because they felt like one of the teams that were the unknowns, because you had a new head coach, you had some of the things that were changing. And so you just didn't know. I mean, we were like, hey, we don't know if the roster is exactly where it needs to be just yet, and all those questions. But then what do? They go out and win the West.
Right.
And now, it's kind of a situation where, again, it's sort of like we talked about earlier, sort of setting the standard. I mean, now the expectation is that LSU gets to the college football playoff this season and has a chance to win the national championship in Brian Kelly's second season. And so just curious your thoughts on this LSU team entering, the year. We've talked about just how loaded they are talent-wise. I mean, the offense could have the best quarterback, could have the best wide receiver group. You go on the defense, you've got I think I made it one of my possible predictions. I mean, Harold Perkins is a guy who could be in the Heisman conversation if you're just trying to find some defensive guys that could get there. I mean, he qualifies for that. There's so many talented players on that defense. Just maybe your expectations for LSU.
Yeah, well, I think, reflecting on last year especially, I think that, and we all saw it, Brian Kelly getting made fun of and his accent that popped up out of nowhere and whatnot. And that was all funny. It was funny. It was. But I thought that and I'm talking from a player's perspective, I thought that what Brian Kelly did last year was unanimously coach of the year type stuff, especially after that we all saw it, that week 1 loss to Florida State on a blocked field goal. And you're coming in year 1 trying to set a completely new culture than what was there before. I mean, Ed Orgeron and Brian Kelly are completely different people, completely different styles. I mean, literally may not be more different than anything, any type of coaching change. And so for Kelly to come in, that game to happen where it's absolute heartbreaking, you lose it in New Orleans on a blocked field goal. I mean, week 1 that can deteriorate, that can ruin your season, that can deteriorate a locker room. It's unstable culture. It is, it looks like, and for them to do what they did the rest of the season, beat Alabama at home, make the SEC championship, and have a chance to win that thing. I thought that was an unbelievable, showing, and really explained why they brought in Brian Kelly into Baton Rouge, and so yeah, the expectations are through the roof. For now, it's like, okay, it's SEC West championship, like we win the SEC West and we're in the championship, or the season was a failure. And I truly think that that's the standard now at LSU, and probably should be, but now it definitely is because they've done that in the past year and they got the talent. We talked about earlier with Jaden Daniels, and I think as a player, you're confident that especially you can get it done 2 ways, running and throwing the ball. He's proven that. Harold Perkins is an absolute game wrecker. I mean, you could have 10 guys out of position on defense, and he can make the play for a tackle for loss. Not a lot of people in college football can do that. And so, I think when you have confidence, you have 2 guys like that on both sides of the ball, the quarterback and your linebacker, 2 of probably the best players on your team and are probably the 2 better leaders on your team. That gives a team a lot of confidence, man, a lot of confidence. And so, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what they do. They go to Alabama this year, and Alabama's going to be, pissed off about what happened last year, the 2-point conversion. They want revenge. And so I'm really intrigued. That honestly, if I had to star a team to watch and I'd be most intrigued to watch, it's probably LSU this year because, if they lose, which we all know you can lose any week in the Southeastern Conference. If they lose a game that they're not supposed to, we could see, some frustration, or just be interesting to see what happens moving forward.
That early season LSU schedule, Chris, we've talked about. I mean, obviously opening with Florida State, biggest game of the year early on, perhaps. And then, they've got those games like an at Mississippi State, which a team like we've talked about, got talent, maybe still don't know the expectations with a new offense. They got Arkansas, in Baton Rouge, which again, with an offense like that, you just never know. They got to go to Ole Miss. They got to go to Missouri. What's the thing Blaine always says, and we kind of echoed it. It's just weird when you have to play in Columbia, Missouri sometimes. Weird things happen, as we saw for Georgia last season. And so I think LSU's early season schedule, not to say that the latter part isn't hard, because, again, they've got to go to Alabama. They've got A&M in there too. But I think it's going to be very fascinating to see how they kind of navigate this early part of the schedule, which, again, really all starts with Florida State, because it's like, okay, you get a win there, you come out and beat a Florida State team that some people think, can be a college football playoff team, should be a favorite to be. If you come out and beat them, all right, you're off to a great start. But if you come out and lose that game, again, it's like, then you start to stare down that possibility of, okay, at Mississippi State, really important, which it would be anyways, but that's an early kickoff there. And so you then start to look at those kind of games. And so, yeah, I mean, it's they don't lack talent, and I think just what Brian Kelly's done in such a short amount of time there, like you said, Gavin, I mean, it's so impressive that this is where they're at now heading into the season with the expectation that they can win the national title in year 2. So
yeah, and I think that's why you got to give him his flowers for last year, because that whole nightmare situation that you just explained is what happened last year. They lost in New Orleans to Florida State by a blocked field goal that was probably, maybe the game of the year, to be honest. And so for him to rally that locker room under, they didn't trust him yet. And I'm not even sure if he trusted his players yet. It was they didn't even have a foundation of a culture there yet. And they've suffered a loss like that. I mean, that can really, really rip into a team. Trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience. That can really affect your psyche of the team and moving forward. College football is all about momentum. It's all about momentum. You play a team in week 3, they look different by week 7. They look different by week 10. It's all about when you play a team. And, for them to be able to do what they did last year, I mean, I got to give them his flowers. It was a tremendous job.
Well, not just that, Gavin. I thought maybe the most impressive thing they did, they got run out of their own building by Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean, that could have – we didn't know exactly how good Tennessee was at that time. I don't know what the odds would have been on LSU winning the West from that point on, but they couldn't have been great.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, I'm seeing comment there from our viewer, Trey Wright. They got boat raced. I mean, it wasn't even a competition. And I literally think on the opening kickoff, I think
They
LSU
fumbled
fumbled
it,
the
I
ball,
believe.
and
Yeah.
Tennessee scored like 2 plays later. I mean, it wasn't even a competition. It was just Tennessee won the entire game. And so, exactly like that. And so somebody's got to do a dive into what Brian Kelly does after losses, because holy smokes, dude,
Yep.
they recover and they play well. And that is hard to do. That is hard to do in your conference when you look down there and you got beat by 40 by Tennessee at home, and you turn around and you got to play whoever the next week, Alabama, Ole Miss, whoever it may be. That's daunting. That's daunting for sure.
Chris, before we jump into the next thing, quickly, just want to thank our guys in the comments here. Jaron, we appreciate the nice comment here. We appreciate your thoughts on our SEC coverage here at Southeastern 14. Lots of great people contributing. Excited to add Gavin to the mix, as we said here. So, yes, we appreciate the support of the channel. Everybody else in the comments, we appreciate you guys. Jason, Trey, as we mentioned, join the group here. And as you've been seeing on the bottom of the screen, guys, lots of ways you can support the channel here. If you'd like, you can, again, hit that subscribe button. That always helps. You can leave us a super chat, which is that little heart down there with a $sign in it. That just allows you donate a few bucks to the channel. That helps us out here to keep producing more great videos for you guys. And also, if you want to advertise with us, you can email us at info@southeastern14.com. Lots of ways you can support the channel. Oh, Chris, and let's not forget, we got the It Just Means More membership tier, which is, again, a $3.99 per month. That's not $399, folks. We're only going to charge you $3.99 per month. That is basically the support tier. So if you want to, give us $4 a month just to help us pump out more videos, that's what that is. So lots of ways to support the channel here at Southeastern 14. Again, we thank you guys.
Yes, thank you to the people that have supported. We're going to have some more readily accessible ways. We're maybe coming up with what an extra membership tier might look like, and some things we could serve our audience with. So if you got some ideas on some extra features you'd like to see, maybe drop those in the comments too, or send those to the info thing. But yes, thank you. There's a lot of familiar names in the chat, and we appreciate each and every one of you guys. And I think this is going to get even better with this guy on the bottom of our screen here. Okay, I was looking at schedules, and we did a schedule preview on everybody, but you just bring up some things in talking there. I mean, think of the different offenses LSU is going to see this year. You got Florida State and Jordan Travis in week 1. I think Jordan Travis, one of the best players in college football, period.
Agreed.
Week 3, you got Mississippi State, whatever that offense looks like under Zach Arnett. That's a question me. You got next week, you got Arkansas. The old, I guess, Sam Pittman ground and pound with the quarterback who can move it and is tough to bring down. You got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, what they bring at you. At Missouri, I guess that's relatively a break because Missouri's bread is going to be buttered more on defense than offense, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got Auburn with Hugh Freeze. They could really have it rolling by that point. You're at the just past the midseason point. And then, just for fun, you get Army the next week. Prepare for a little triple option. I'm like, does any – and then after that, you get Alabama after the bye week. Like, does any school in the country run the gamut of offensive challenges like LSU's going to run in that 7-game span or whatever that was?
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a good point. And and they play Army. I mean, circle that one. That is a
Right.
triple option. I mean, that can happen to anybody. And I'm not saying they're going to get beat by Army, but that is tough to defend. You're going to spend as much time preparing for that offense as you are for Tennessee, I can promise you. And so, I think starting out in the year, I think you and I have talked about this in the past, Chris. They got Florida State, and Florida State's super interesting because I think by week 4, by Monday morning, when we wake up week 5 of Monday morning, Florida State's going to be a top 2 team in the country, or they're going to be at the bottom of the top 25 because they play LSU week 1 and they got at Clemson week 4. We're going to find out real quick how good Florida State is, real quick. And so, that's a huge game for LSU. We saw it last year. We saw, what that did to them. At the same time, then they go and prepare for all these other offenses. The good news is, like we said, if you're going to prepare for all these things, you got to have the staff, and Brian Kelly's got it. And not only does he have the staff, but he's got the Jimmies and Joes. And to me, defense is about Jimmies and Joes because, like we said earlier, you can have guys out of position, but if you have Harold Perkins and you have good corners and you have safeties who are going to come down and thump you in the run game, you can play with anybody in the country. And I think that's what LSU has. and not a lot of schools do. And so, I think they're up for the challenge. I think if we read off that schedule right there offensively, and we said that was all the teams that Kentucky was playing, that's all the teams that South Carolina was playing, I think I'd be a little more concerned. I think it's definitely a challenge, but if there's anyone up for it, I think it's definitely Brian Kelly and LSU.
Chris, can we go to the other part of the state of Florida for a second? Because I know this was kind of on our topic list at some point today, but the Florida Gators, you want to talk about a team that is a wide range of potential outcomes this season, a wide range of predictions. Chris, you were bringing this up. I didn't see it, but you said, was it The Athletic?
Stuart Mandel.
Yeah. What was the prediction again that they had for Florida?
He rolled out his SEC East, and West 2 picks today. He's got Florida going 1-7 in the SEC, 3-9 overall, and Billy Napier getting fired at the end of the season. Now, look, I think firing Billy Napier would be a big mistake, but we have said this all off season. The schedule is brutal. You begin at Utah, you end with Florida State, and you've got the SEC in between. And I mean, rationally, no. Look at the way he's recruiting. He had a lot to rebuild. You can't say on one hand, well, we're going to fire Dan Mullen because he's not recruiting well, and then just leave it at there. If that's the reason you don't think your talent's very good and you're firing your coach, you have got to then adjust the expectations for the next coach. But hello, guys, this is the SEC. When do we ever get realistic about things? And I thought that was a very interesting prediction. Look, Gavin, you guys played Florida a year ago. You beat Florida in a big upset.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you picked up on the field in that game, what that was like playing those guys, but that is going to be a very interesting dynamic because you know how teams get crushed under the pressure in this league, and there's already so many things set up that work against Billy Napier before they even kick the ball off. Now, do I think that's fair? No, I don't. But that is the reality. The reality is that we're not always judged by fair things. Yeah. Patience is run thin, and I'm very interested to see that doesn't go the way people in Florida hope. What's that in like?
Yeah, I think that let's just be honest here. The expectation that Florida is the expectation to be up there with Georgia, with LSU, with Alabama. That is the tier of the league that they're in and where they belong. And, we saw it's not that that's new with Napier. It's always been like that. We saw it with Mullen. Dan Mullen got fired the year after he made the SEC championship, by the way. Jim McElwain got fired the year after he made the SEC championship, by the way. They had another season, but then they got fired at the end of that season. And so it happens quick, and it can happen real quick. And I think that, you kind of, and you guys all know what I'm talking about, that momentum of hot seat kind of heats up a bit and rolls and rolls and rolls. And I think, honestly, a lot of coaches get fired just because, athletic departments and ADs are kind of hear too much of it. And that's how I think that, and we've seen it. I mean, we saw it when my man, oh my gosh, the Tennessee hire that never happened.
Yeah. Greg
Schiano. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't get there. And Greg Schiano was the head coach of Tennessee until the fans decided they didn't want him, and then he wasn't. And so I think now in the day and age of social media, I think the fans have a lot more control, and I think they have a louder voice in the department heads, what that looks like. And so for Florida, yeah, and we played Florida last year. I'd be lying to you if I told you it felt the same as when we played Georgia. It didn't feel the same when we played Alabama. And it was just a little less physical and a little more forgiving. I don't mean to, crap on Florida or anything like that, but I'm just being candid here. And to me, the biggest question mark as well is then you go on, you make a bowl game, you go 6-6 at Florida. Okay, but they get absolutely boat raced against Oregon State in the Las Vegas Bowl, where those bowl games are really telling because you're on campus when no one else is, having all these extra practices for one game, and you go out there and lay an egg in Las Vegas against a Pac-12 team that you should beat 10 out of 10 times and get beat by 30. To me, that told me that there's a little bit of a buy-in issue, to be honest with you. There's a little bit of a trust issue that's going on there at Florida because I've been a part of those bowl practices. I've been a part of those, hanging out in the bowl season and waiting for your stuff to come around. There's a lot of time to talk. There's a lot of time to do nothing because no one's on campus. There's no class because of winter break, and you're just waiting for that bowl game at the end of December. And so to me, that was really telling, and I did not exactly give me confidence for the Gators heading into this year. So I'd be interested. I think 3-9 is possible, like whoever predicted. I think it's possible. I think they're going to win more than 3 games, but I think that a 6, a better season than last year is, I don't want to say a reach, but it's a task for sure. It's a task for sure, just because of what's in front of them and the confidence they have going into this year. I hope they prove me wrong, because when Florida's good, college football is better. When Florida's good, college football is better, and so I hope they prove me wrong, but we'll see.
All right, guys, we got about 5 minutes. Blake, anything in the comments? Any quick topics you want to bring up before we close in a few?
Yeah, quick shout out to Nathan for the super chat. We appreciate it, Nathan. $1.99. Greatly appreciate that. Again, guys, you can do that. Hit that little heart sign with $1 in it. Yeah, you can check it out with the super chat, and you can leave a comment within it as well. You don't have to just give us money. You can leave a comment, and we will put that up on the screen as we do a lot of these. So, yeah, guys, I mean, this is, like we said, there's so many different things we get into. This 1 hour will fly by each day. I think it's like we go into it like, oh, yeah, we'll get to all these things. Just sometimes that doesn't happen. So, Chris, here's what we're going to do. We got 4 minutes to go here, 5 minutes. We're going to open it up to you guys. Any quick questions? We'll do a rapid fire Q&A here in the comments. If you guys have anything you want to ask, throw it in the comments. Can be anything. We may not answer it if it's just anything wild and crazy, but you can ask us anything. And yeah, we'll have some fun with it here in the last 5 minutes. But again, anything else, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Lots of videos on the channel. All your team previews, schedule previews, predictions. We've got all our predictions up for the big week 1 games. You can find out what our thoughts are on the Vanderbilt Hawaii game this weekend as well, and a lot of betting stuff as well. Oh, here's a good one, Gavin. I knew we'd get a good one here. So, best away game experience.
That's good. I would. I wish I could change it up a bit, but since we're on the topic, it might be Florida, to be honest with you. You walk into the Swamp, it's the steepest stadium that I've ever played in. They're right up on you, and then it goes straight up versus other stadiums you kind of have some space. There's like grass or maybe cheerleaders in between you and the fans. They're right up on you. The student section's right behind you, calling your name, looking up your Instagram, calling your girlfriend's name at you, whatever it may be. And then it goes straight up and they sing Tom Petty at the start of the 4th quarter. It's really pretty cool. But that's just a continuation of, I've played in, I think 12 of the 14 SEC stadiums, I believe, besides LSU and Jordan Hare. And if Florida is the best experience I've played in, then they deserve to have one of the better teams in the country, and that we're not seeing that right now. So, like I said earlier, college football is better when Florida is a good team, and for the sake of it, I hope that they are here soon.
Let's see what else we got here, Chris. We'll run through this one real quickly. I think we talked about the Arkansas defensive line. I think the approach they're going to take, and Chris, we can make this a quick answer, but highest sacks per game. Did one of us may have picked that in one of our videos or season preview
Blaine
videos?
did.
Blaine may have picked that. Yeah. Just talking about how the defense is going to change and the aggressive approach they're going to take there, but with Travis Williams. So, Chris, I think that's probably the best way to put it. Is you would expect them to have a lot of sacks just based on their approach. So,
yeah, I mean, I do wonder how much losing Drew Sanders hurts. He was a big part of what they did a year ago. But there's an awful lot of confidence coming out of that camp. I'm very interested to see what that looks like when they hit the field. I find myself reserving judgment on a lot of these things right now, because I feel like if you listen to stuff coming out of camp at every place, you're convinced there's about 13 teams they're going to be in the playoffs from the SEC, and that can't all happen. But yeah, I mean, they've got a history of doing it, but I do wonder about the Sanders loss there.
All right, we'll wrap up with this. And Gavin, I'm not going to ask you to change the game plan, but we'll kind of twist this in a different way. What are you most interested to see with Vanderbilt's offense as we head into week 0 against this Hawaii team and really just moving forward during the season?
Yeah, I would say how they attack the ball downfield. I think that needs to be their strength this year. When in past it's been handing it to Keyshawn Vaughn and then Ray Davis. And so moving forward, the strength of Vanderbilt's team is their receivers and AJ, who can rip it. And so I'd be interested to see how they flush all those guys in and out of the game. And I think it's going to be more exciting. I think it's going to be really exciting because you're going to see that quick score mentality that can happen with a 60-yard post or whatever it may be that maybe took us 12 plays to get down the field and score in the red zone previously. I I think Vandy's going to have the opportunity to strike quick, which hasn't happened in the past. So that's definitely something that I'm excited for.
All right, Chris, wrap it up.
Yeah, boy, it's been fun. Time flies when you're having fun. We had a lot of it today. This is the first time we've worked together, just for all you guys out there. And I think we had a great show today. I do apologize for my internet connection. I literally got the high-speed internet I've been waiting for 2 years this last week, and then God only knows what happened.
Of the high-speed internet that I've been hearing about for 2 years now. I think this thing is a fairy tale. I don't think it's an actual thing at all. So
you can check the trenches in my yard.
To keep digging.
I think I'm not meant for nice things, guys. I don't know what else to say, but I will say this: as we were going, I started thinking, man, we could have a whole episode with Gavin, probably a whole week with Gavin, just on like the stuff that goes on behind this, like tampering.
Yeah.
Love to hear the stories there. Don't want you to burn anybody, but just think the visiting locker room situation. That one popped up. We've got a world of experience here coming from the guy at the bottom of our screen, and I want us to tap into that. So if you guys want to leave stuff in the comments, obviously we've got kind of things planned out ahead of time of 3 or 4 things we want to talk about, and we build our show off those things because we don't want to advertise something and then you come here and, hey, wait, what happened? These guys didn't talk about it. So we want to be respectful to the agenda that we have planned out ahead of time. But if you guys want to drop stuff in the comments or email of, hey, these are things I'd like to hear you guys talk to Gavin about, we're happy to work those into future shows. Obviously, we've got week 0 on the horizon. We've got Vanderbilt and Hawaii coming up next. And so we'll hit that, I think, on Friday. I've got a list of a lot of things that we didn't even get to today. I think I want to have a quarterback episode maybe between now and week 1. So many topics, so little time. But the good news is we'll be back on Thursday and Friday at 11 o'clock Central to hit all those things. So, again, drop your suggestions and your comments in the comments, and we'll try to take those and use that as some guidance going forward. For Gavin Schoenwald and Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again on Thursday.